Welcome to the Learning Can't Wait podcast, a Full Mind production. At Full Mind, our vision is to ensure every child has access to an exceptional education. Each episode, we will be joined by pathfinders within and around the education space who are bringing about transformational change on behalf of deserving students. I am your host, Hayley Spira Bauer. Welcome back, everybody, to the Learning Can't Wait podcast. I am excited to introduce our next guest. We have Perry Rosenstein, the co-founder and CEO of WriteOn, an AI writing coach designed for the classroom, joining us here today. Welcome, Perry.
Thanks, Hayley. Thanks for having me.
I'm really excited to have you for a couple of reasons. I don't always have guests on the podcast when they are founders and kind of like edtech creators whose tools I have used in the classroom or at home. It's probably the rarest of all my guests. And you are in the category of tool creators that I have tried. So really eager to dive in and talk to you about WriteOn, but also just hear about how you got here.
Yeah, absolutely. So my background, I'm an entrepreneur, and I thought actually after I sold my second company, I thought I would become a teacher. I've tutored kids my whole life, starting when I was 15 up until now. I tutored foster kids in my community, and that moment of when a light bulb goes on, you connect with a student one-on-one, engage with stuff. It's my favorite. I wound up substitute teaching for a year, all different classrooms, hoping to find my home, and it turns out I just wasn't particularly talented at managing classrooms. Realized it wasn't for me. But I did wind up having so many conversations with teachers, principals, administrators, parents. I wound up running for school board. And one of the things the reasons that I ran was because I wanted to make sure that there was proper tools were being used in the classroom. I saw both that there were these opportunities to innovate that weren't being utilized, and also that there were some tools that are probably pretty terrible that were being deployed. I wound up losing the election with 49.5% of the vote, which kind of stung, but I still wanted to give back to education, and my strength is actually developing software products, and I wanted to continue this path to building tools that really help teachers and teachers teach and students learn. And that was the genesis of WriteOn.
You know, writing proficiency to me is one of those skills that shows up in every conversation about college and career readiness. And yet it remains one of the most under-resourced areas in schools. What problem did you see that felt too big to ignore?
That's a great question. I think there's a lot of effort, energy around read by three, and rightfully so. There's a lot of research that if you can read by third grade, you can't read by third grade, there's negative outcomes, throughout your academic career. And I think the same with writing. If you can't write by sixth grade, when you start middle school and you're being assessed and evaluated on the quality of your writing, like how can you succeed? And so I think it's a great point. Writing is neglected. The problem I spoke with, our focus was on late elementary school teachers. And I talked with dozens of them before I started WriteOn. And I asked, I actually wasn't thinking to start, I was going to do writing. And I asked, what's the hardest thing for you to teach? And writing came up almost every single time. And I would ask, well, why? And it's because writing, the way to teach writing is, or the best way to learn it is through one-on-one coaching, having someone sit with you, with a student as they are writing and giving them feedback, not days later on a paper, but in real time to help them improve, whether that's big ideas to proofreading, word choice, whatever. But all parts of writing, that's the way to improve. And I saw this gap that there's this potentially for AI to help with that. And so what we sought to build with WriteOn was, the thing we were aspiring to, and I think we've achieved is, what if it could be like every student in your classroom has an amazing tutor, a teacher that's sitting next to them, giving them help as they write.
You know, the words AI writing coach can trigger a lot of anxiety for teachers right now, especially around academic integrity. How do you talk to teachers about what WriteOn actually is versus what they're afraid of it might be?
It's a great question. And I think they're right to be concerned. because I think a lot of when it comes to AI products generally, I think we're in the first inning. Like we are really at the beginning, and a lot of the tools, frankly, are bad that teachers have tried. One of the ways that they're bad is that they give kids the answers, right?
Mhm.
They're another way that they're bad is especially for a fourth grader, if you have a chatbot that is just sitting in the corner, that's going to be distracting the kids from the act of writing, of critical thinking. Writing is not a thing that's just quick. It requires deep reflection and you have to go deep. What I would say is um, what's really important is, and the way that we've built it first, as I mentioned, we don't ever give away the answers. And feedback it's not a wall of feedback. It's going through and giving really specific feedback. How might you make this stronger? How might you reorder these ideas to make it better? And we also integrate, you can't just have a chatbot on the side. You have to integrate it into the writing process itself. So something we've put a lot of effort in is, for example, scaffolding, which every grade elementary school teacher uses that to help teach writing, but none of the tools that I've seen actually embed scaffolding into the product.
Yeah.
So making sure that it's not just this AI tutor that sits in the corner, but it's a part of a broader solution that incorporates best practices and how to make kids better writers.
Yeah, I referenced my experience using it, and you and I met, and I was like, I have to try this with my fourth grader. He is like, for all the teachers listening, he is super bright. His brain thinks faster than his hand, and he really struggles to get his thoughts out, and it frustrates him. And when he tried WriteOn, he was like, Mom, this is the best ever. This is so great. He's like, I want to use Starby every day. And so like I also lived the experience of finding writing to be the hardest thing to teach. And helping him with writing is the hardest thing as well. So I hear your experience. I was skeptical when I first looked at it because I was like, is it just going to prompt him and tell him like, now write this? Here's the sentence starter. And it didn't. It put the onus on him. Let's talk about that though, because that kind of tension is what's a big debate in ed tech right now about centering kids or centering student and their thinking, humans at the center, with AI tools. Like broadly, as you think about that and as you like observe and engage in that dialogue, where do you think we're going right and wrong as a system in centering humans in the technology?
It's a great question. Um, so WriteOn isn't, just to be clear, it's not a curriculum. You can plug it into anything. So if you're using a curriculum, uh, you could use it with that, just plug in the prompt. Or if a teacher has their own things they want kids to write about, or kids want to write about their own things, they can do that. I think taking a step back, yeah, it's our education system is very it's not student centric enough. I think kids learn when they're motivated to learn by subjects that do motivate them. There is also, it is a balance though between that and there are a certain set of things that we as a community, as a society should value our kids learning, whether it's about democracy and government. There's certain things that if we build better citizens, more thoughtful, and have a shared understanding of certain concepts and values that I do think is helpful. So it is a tension, and I would love to see both in schools. Some core things that are just really important for all kids to understand, but also letting kids explore their whatever they're passionate about. And I would love to see more writing uh, proficiency developed by the kids exploring, explaining their ideas or writing stories about what interests them.
Yeah, I think that the debate, you said it earlier that we're like in our first inning of AI tech tools for classrooms and for schools. And I might even say our second inning because only because and we could have different perspectives and still, have a good conversation here. Only because we've seen a lot of pivot recently as funding has changed. We had a ton of funding being poured into high dosage tutoring. As a result, during COVID, as a result, we saw a ton of chatbots pop up
and ed tech companies get created. And then of course we had ChatGPT go live in like a very public way. Not that the technologies didn't exist before, but they became widely available, widely utilized, and you saw a lot of like skins being built atop LLMs and generative AI tools. And now then there was a bunch of pushback on that. So I'm hopeful that we're in inning two in that we've iterated further away from AI for AI's sake. And now we're looking at intentionality and outcomes and purpose. But, I welcome your pushback if you don't think that's true yet.
I think it's true, and we're directionally first inning, second inning. There's still a long way to go. I think, yeah, there was a period when I would talk to administrators like, what is our AI strategy? And I think there's some still validity to that, but I think starting to focus on more narrow question, like we're starting a very narrow question of how do we help kids learn to write, but thinking of it more as AI is a tool. What are we trying to solve? Putting AI in something that doesn't need it, it's not helpful. And I think there's rightful pushback there. And I'm hoping we're in this. I hope you're right. We're entering the second inning. We're seeing it with our early customers, but starting to get a little bit more, the products hopefully are starting to get better, but also starting to see a little bit more thoughtfulness around implementation. And if it's not improving outcomes, why are we doing it? AI for its own sake. I think that era, I think you're 100% right. I'm hoping, I'm not going to, it's starting to be over and we're being more thoughtful about it.
You ran for school board, as you alluded to in your introduction. I know it didn't play out the way that you had hoped. Talk to me about what your vision as a school board member was and how that may have evolved since you last ran, for making schools in your community better.
Yeah, it's a great question. And I think I mean, there are many schools in a way are our last bastion of community. Like it is the place where people from all across all the neighborhoods send their kids. And so all the problems we see as a society show up in different ways in their schools. I think when it comes to the promise of education with learning, for me, it's about exactly what you talked about was my sort of vision was we I'm less concerned about development of individual proficiencies in certain subjects, but there are these skills that I think no matter what future we have are going to be important. I think that's critical thinking. I think that's communication, right? I think it's understanding civic responsibility. And so I would love to, what I talked about was I would love to see a more personalized approach on how we get there, but having a kind of a sort of a mutual shared understanding of like these are the skills that we need to develop in our kids, regardless by the time they leave our education system.
Oh, shared understanding sounds so nice.
Wouldn't it be? It's something.
Like, I don't mean to be like flippant about it, but we are so polarized as a society right now. And I find I'm never going to be hopeless. I always have hope. That's why I do the work I do. And I've been dedicated to it for 2 decades. Um, and it feels harder today than it ever has been.
Yeah. Things are just getting more and more polarized. It's very true. I think this is all the more reason why literacy broadly, writing specifically, is really important. We have to be able to critically assess whether what we're being told is true and to be able to speak truth, and to be able to communicate with people different from us. Um, but yeah, I didn't mention this at the beginning, but I started my career in doing activism work, and it's by the tenor of news and how news has become polarized. There used to be a shared sense of truth.
Yeah.
We may have had our differences of opinion, but we agree on a basic set of facts about how the world is operating. And I don't know that that's the case anymore.
Speaking of facts and writing, one of my favorite lessons to teach, and the lesson that my first grader has learned this year, is the difference between facts and opinions. And now that he's officially learned it, I will like walk through anything that happens, like when my boys are fighting about like who did this best. And I'm like, you have an opinion and you have an opinion, and these opinions are not always the same. Like I feel like I'm like living that civics lesson in my home, all because of the writing lesson that they learned in school. So
Yeah, my 4-year-old, we're still working on truth from if we utter it, is it true? But yeah, it's an important one to be able to understand. I'm glad your first grader's there. I think
right, it took
people go
time.
through a lot of life and don't get there.
This is like a parenting kind of like a side quest here, but I read that instead of telling your kids like, oh, that's not true or that's a lie, you like make up a silly name for it that you have as a family so that they don't feel the shame of lying. Because shame is what drives kids to lie. Like they don't want to disappoint you, they don't want to get in trouble, they don't want to see themselves as worse. So if you say like we called it like oh, are you being a trickster right now? Then they would tell the truth. So
Yep.
take it or leave it, audience and Perry. Take it or leave it.
What's also funny is how dispositional, like I have a 6-year-old and a 4-year-old, and I run into Parentland. My 6-year-old is like never told a lie. Just it's just not in him. And my 4-year-old is at the point where just whatever kind of suits him. It's like, have you had your treat yet? Like, never. He's never had his treat before. So,
Never, no.
so it's also interesting how I feel it's like this ingrained part of who you are, like truth. Like it's like either you have it or you don't. It's
Oh gosh.
interesting. That might
Yeah.
not be true, but that's my observation
Well,
from my,
it's two
yeah,
things, two things, right? So one, those second borns are just built different.
that's true.
Uh, Also, as someone with ADHD who learned later in life about injustice sensitivity, lying is really, really hard for me. So I like can't lie. I didn't lie as a kid. I really struggle with things that are immoral. My friends used to call me like the moral compass. And I didn't know why. And now I know what injustice sensitivity is. And it's like this whole thing related to neurodiversity. And some people that don't have it, ADHD or neurodiversity also have injustice sensitivity. But I feel very strongly that the lying is like, or not lying can be a part of that. Like just to your point, the dispositions that we have.
Huh, that sounds, I didn't know that was like a clinical thing because I'm pretty similar. I've done activism work and I even see the education work as part of my injustice and sensitivity.
100%. Like it is both again, like just to nerd out, it's both my special interest, right? Like getting kids closer to educational justice and rooting out. Like there was a player in this space that I've actually alluded to while we were talking about the AI kind of debacle. And when we had seen a lot of tools, there was a player in this space that was like using the funding for bad. And anybody who knows me knows who I'm talking about. And I've never said the name publicly because I don't need to anymore. They just went after the money. They were providing solutions that were not good for kids. And I kid you not, it felt like my skin crawled anytime anyone brought it up to me. Like I had a physical reaction to talking about these tools that were cropping up or popping up during this funding kind of like onslaught of ESSER funds federally and then local funds being released. And it was painful. And we'd go head to head with them and we'd lose because they beat us on cost every time. And then it became very obvious that what they were doing was not best for kids. And they received a ton of backlash and a lot changed. And they don't even offer those services or product lines anymore. And I'm happy for the industry, but sad for the kids who were in schools who were being sold this like tool that didn't actually do what they needed it to do. So it
Yeah,
did play out.
I'm new to education technology as a space, but one thing I'm already confronting is this tension between, I think if you're doing it for the right reason, I mean, for the most part, you're doing it for the kids and the teachers.
Yeah.
They're not necessarily the people who are buying the tools. And there are certainly some school districts, the principal I work with, who totally get it. And defer a lot to like they see it in the classroom working and they're like, it works. And then there are others, whether they just haven't been in the classroom for too long or just facing pressures politically sometimes.
Yeah.
Obviously, financial pressure is really acute and make decisions sometimes not in that best interest. And yeah, it's the reason I'm doing this. Like, I just I look at, sales, I have nothing against sales reps at companies, but I see the AI tools that they have are so much better than the tools we're giving to our teachers. And I was just
Yeah, you posted about this
like,
on LinkedIn. Say more about that.
I just see like
Like, give an
this.
example of a tool that you see. You don't have to use it by name, but like describe it. Because I see this as well. Like, education is like literally the last in the line for advancements.
Yeah. I mean, I think there are lots of, I don't want to get into sales tools, but there are just lots of things that are really state of the art and help give folks like just really, really good tools that are user friendly and really give them leverage to do their work. I just think this is something that predates AI. I've just noticed that tools in the ed tech space feel 10 years older than everywhere else.
Yeah,
They're just,
totally.
and that can range from, at its best, which is still bad, they're just clunky and not user friendly. Um, but at its worst, can just miss or misapply new trends. And I think that's, hopefully, again, you were correct, and we're entering the second inning or the third inning, and it's going to get better, and we'll have more entrepreneurs building student-centric things that really help in the classroom. But yeah, we have to make it happen.
The other thing that's really front and center right now that I hear more and more is a conversation around tool impact, right? With funding drying up, with student enrollment down in many places and schools having to tighten their budgets. Many leaders talk openly about being more attuned to the impact that a tool can have on kids. I know WriteOn is still newer to the space. Talk about how you desire to measure impact over time.
Great question. And we've done some preliminary work we did preliminary study with a group of um, tier two English learners in classrooms, a small group. And the way that we measured it, well, there are two ways that we measured success. The first is a more classic way. It just does the writing improve? And there are rubrics, obviously, for writing. We used SBAC, and we say, oh, you use WriteOn for 8 weeks, 12 weeks, doesn't improve. And in their case, it did demonstrably and really, really quickly. They went, many kids went from writing a paragraph meant one long run-on sentence to a clear articulation of an idea with a thesis and supporting evidence and a conclusion. Um, the second, which I think needs more attention, I would say, generally speaking, because it's harder to measure, is just engagement. One of the things with writing is I expected when I went into classrooms, all the kids would hate math and love writing. And it turned out to be the opposite. Not that every kid loved math, but writing was the subject that they liked universally the least. And I think it has to do with the fact that it's really hard and they feel that they're not good at it and they don't know where to start. And then there's this loop where, well, I'm bad at it, and so I don't like it, and so I don't like it, I'm not going to work on it. And so the second thing we wanted to test was attitudes around writing. So we asked, do you like it? Do you know where to start? Um, Questions like that. And I think that those engagement as a metric it probably deserves generally more attention. But for writing, I think even the administrators I work with understand that that's a really important thing. If you can increase motivation, that's half the battle, right? Over time, of course, we want to develop more and more robust studies that show that we improve writing. I'm pretty confident that it does because we're not doing it. It's not a new approach to say like people used to learn to read this way, now they learn to read this way. All we're doing is taking things we know work, which is giving kids one-on-one feedback and making that more scalable, right? That said, of course, we want to produce studies next year that show on broader groups of kids that it improves writing over time. But also, writing isn't an isolated skill, right? Writing is the other half of literacy is reading and writing. And what I would love to develop with some schools and school districts is showing that it not only improves skill in writing, but that reading scores improve as well. Because writing is where you tighten the screws, you demonstrate understanding. When you're receiving feedback, you gain understanding of what you were reading, right? It's not just tutoring you being a writer, it's tutoring you on the subject matter. And so what I would love to start moving forward is that it from a broader perspective that our writing program helps with literacy, helps with understanding ideas, not just expressing them.
It heartens me that you have such a focus on the impact from the start. It is absolutely the only move, in my opinion, is to be able to walk into schools and say, like, here's the tool I built. Here's why I think you should use it. And here's the impact we're having on kiddos just like yours. Leaders, there's like always a proof of concept mindset with leaders. My neighbor's using that. Oh, how are they using it? It just, education is a slow moving behemoth. And proof of concept from peers is really, really big. So I love that that's an integral part of how you've built WriteOn, and how you're hoping to continue to build it is with impact in mind, and being able to also assess, attitudes. I think when I got hired as a fifth grade reading teacher, I tell this story all the time on the podcast. I got told my job is to help kids fall in love with reading, because once they fall in love with reading, they will be voluminous readers. And obviously, they still need explicit instruction, but voluminous reading itself, just like voluminous writing itself, will drive student growth. The art of practicing writing, getting feedback on all of that is secondary to kids being motivated and engaged.
Yep, exactly. It's like a don't pass go. If a student doesn't know where to start, they don't like it, you've lost before you've started. And with writing, I think it's particularly important. And yeah, it's the next year. This just for context, we started the company less than a year ago. So this year is really I was in the classroom every single day, looking at kids use it, talking to teachers, and iterating it. And I think next year, as we grow and do more, I think going from shorter pilots to year-long pilots, 2-year-long pilots is proving what we see with our eyes every day, right? We see the kids improving. We see the teachers love it, but the next step is to develop scientifically valid studies over longer periods of time that prove deeper outcomes.
You have people like me saying their kid loves it.
Yeah, I mean,
right?
Yeah, and I think that is a totally valid way to start and in fact grow. But at some point, if you really want to, grow impact, go into districts where maybe a superintendent is skeptical, showing the evidence is really critical.
Yeah, and as you said, you've scaled and sold 2 companies previously. Like, about product market fit. This isn't your first rodeo. How is education different as it relates to building or founding, building, scaling tech? What have you seen so far that's different?
Yeah, I mean, I think first of all, there's for me this greater, and I love building products, but I think there's a greater intrinsic care and responsibility. Because if the thing I'm fighting is like snake oil in the classroom and building things that work and that kids love, there's a higher bar. For me, there's a higher bar. But as a market, as you mentioned, I think the biggest thing is that it is slower moving. It's very, very cyclical. Like in most businesses, you can buy whenever whatever you want. With education, it does tend to be much more. This is when we pilot. This is when we put things into the budget. Public schools are government entities. It's a government procurement process, right? And I think, yeah, and being slow is not such a bad thing.
Not always.
It's not always a bad thing that we're not just rushing to adopt something. We've seen both sides of that. And I think the other big one is that, with some exceptions, usually the first 2 companies, the thing that I was selling, the users were very connected to the purchaser, right? Like, whereas it's what I talked about earlier, like if you're building something for superintendents for data or something, then it's fine. But for what I'm passionate about, which is helping teachers and students, that's at very least you're selling to the principal, if not administrators. And so you need to it's almost like step 1 is building something for teachers and students, and then you need to sort of develop evidence and convince, and how we talk to. There's some obviously commonality how we talk to a teacher, and we talk to superintendents. It's going to help kids become better, more confident writers. but how you speak to them is actually quite different, and that's been very interesting.
So for my final question, I'm actually going to tweak it from what I told you earlier, what you've heard on the podcast before, and ask you, what advice would you give a founder who's entering ed tech and wanting to build a tool today? What would you tell them?
I think you have to love it. Like you have to be, this has to be your mission, like at a really deep level. Because if you're just trying to make some money and start a business for the sake of it, like don't get into education. It's challenging from a business perspective, and it's slow. It has to be like your deep why. You have to be so motivated. Like I think like you, like I am like at heart an activist, someone who really deeply cares. And I think if you don't have that, don't do it. You'll actually not only probably have a hard time succeeding, but you may take these weird shortcuts that lead you to actively harming education. And so yeah, just I would say stay out unless you really care. And I think the other big one is um, unless you were, I did some substitute teaching and I tutored a lot, but unless you've been in the classroom a lot, like find immediately step one teachers and principals that believe in you. And if you're going to build something that's like for the classroom, like build it in the classroom. Make sure you're incorporating best practices for that skill. Don't build another chatbot. Like if you're doing with writing, build in the writing process. If you're building something for math, make it a math tool, and really dig in and solve a problem.
Awesome. Perry, thank you so much for coming on and sharing your journey and your story and all the things folks needed to know about WriteOn. It's been a pleasure having you on the podcast today.
Well, thank you for having me.
And thank you to everybody for tuning in.
Thanks for listening to the Learning Can't Wait podcast. If you like what you heard, please rate, review, and share this episode. Be the first to know when we have a new episode by subscribing wherever you listen to podcasts. If you'd like to be a guest on the show or have a suggestion for an episode, email us at podcast@fullmindlearning.com.